7:07 this morning as we move along here on KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin. We have our Congressman Jodey Arrington on line one, as we do on occasion. Good morning, Congressman.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good morning, Dave. Matt, I'm doing great, and good to be on KFYO, and good to be with your listeners this morning.
Yeah. Well, how are things in D.C. this morning?
Well, we came off a rough week last week with the shooting.
Yeah, no kidding.
Which was scary and sad and unfortunate. And you know, we live in a free and open society and government, and there are crazy people out there. And blessings come out of evil. And I think the blessing here is perspective and knowing that why we're here, and refocusing everybody and you know, where you have lots of hyper-partisanship and vitriol in the process and way too much personal attacks. This refocuses us as Americans first, even if we disagree, to try to be, you know, not just show each other mutual respect as Americans first and all that. And I think that's a blessing. And so anyway, it was a rough week, but there were some positive things on the legislative front. Major.
Well, before we move on to that, tell
Yeah.
me, what do you think? Do you think that this is going to have any profound or prolonged effect on maybe changing the tone in Washington?
So this is going to sound cynical, but I've not seen, even after 9/11. I was here with President Bush in the White House on 9/11, and it wasn't even sustained and prolonged. So I don't know. I don't think so. I think we've got to change the culture here in Washington. I think that's going to take a generational shift, and I think you will see it over time, because I think Americans are sick of it. I think I'm 45. I think my generation and the younger folks, especially the millennials, that they're not going to tolerate it. So I think we're going to see change. These things do put things in perspective. They can help, but I'm not holding out hope for a sustainable change in attitude and tone. But again, I think all of us, though, are affected by it. So,
well, I can only imagine about how after this incident, how concerned you are and other House members. Is there a lot of talk about providing security for you guys, or changing up the security?
Yeah, there is, and I know the thank God the protection detail for Steve Scalise, the whip, was there, or you would have had more casualties. More injuries, and you would have several casualties, I believe, because they were just sitting ducks out there. So yeah, there is. Talks about, when you have about beefing up security, you just have to be careful. But again, if somebody is hell bent on doing something like that in this society, in America, just with our openness, it's going to be hard to prevent it. But you got to do more to prevent it. And I think the law enforcement community knows that. The Capitol Hill Police and are watching the tape, so to speak. And they're gonna increase security measures.
Yeah.
But we'll always have some vulnerability, Dave. In this.
Yeah, I think that's just that comes with the territory, no doubt about it. Well, Congressman, the big news here and across the country is the Georgia House race. So the $50 million spent on a House race, and the Democrats lose. What do you make? What is the message that you have? That comes to you from this Democrat loss?
I think first and foremost is that the majority of people want reforms and the kind of reform agenda that Republicans are advancing, and that's to rein in the government and unleash the power of the markets and the entrepreneurs and the job creators. Get off the backs of our families and provide more state sovereignty and the things that just more freedom. And I think that agenda and that sort of philosophical approach to what our country needs right now has won the day. And in the last four special elections, the conservatives have won the last four. Now, you also had a guy that came from outside of the district. In Ossoff, you had most of his money, I think 97% of his money came from outside of the district. So I know in West Texas people don't take too kindly to that sort of carpetbagger approach to politics. And so you got to look at the candidate, too. I mean, just like with Hillary Clinton, you got to look at the quality of candidate that they're putting out there. But overall, I think it's about our values, I'd say conservative values, conservative principles, getting back to the Constitution, and reining in the federal government. I think people want to see that.
Yeah. Congressman, y'all have been working on a farm bill, and y'all have been having the farm bill hearing, and apparently Texas Tech is part of that. Can you kind of go over that with us?
Yeah, we're also going to have a Facebook Live where I'm going to visit with Chancellor Duncan and President Ted Mitchell. He's actually up here for a VA roundtable discussion, and that's going to be from 11:10 to 11:40 today for your listeners. We'd love to have them tune in. So that's Eastern time. So that would be make that 10:10 to 10:40 Central Time.
Yeah, don't tell Chad.
So we've got research in agriculture is the topic. Very important. Texas Tech and as a former vice chancellor for research at Tech, I can tell you that we are on the leading edge of, for example, plant genomics, where we modify plants, cotton in most cases, so that you can grow it where it's more tolerant to drought and it's resistant to some viruses. So we're able to be more productive in growing food and fiber for our country and around the world. That's so that the Biopolymer Institute and a lot of folks, Dr. Abidi and others at Tech do a great job, Dick Auld. The other is food safety. We are the national leader in food safety, Dr. Mindy Brashears, and what they do to protect our food supply and salmonella and other challenges that we face. That I think there are ways to quantify the impact on human life, but also our economy. And when you look at it in aggregate nationally, these are big problems to solve. But it makes me very proud that Texas Tech has, again, some of the world leaders on these issues. So it's about making the investment in R&D for national priorities. And Texas Tech's right there on the front lines.
Okay, Congressman, we have to take a quick break. Can you hold with us over the break?
Absolutely.
All right. We'll be right back with Congressman Jodey Arrington.
News Talk, 95.1 FM and 790 AM. We are KFYO Mornings with Dave King and Matt Martin.
We're here with Congressman Jodey Arrington. Congressman, I do have a question about the debt ceiling. I know that a lot of times the more conservative people in the House or congressmen in the House don't really like raising that debt ceiling. Are we going to be able to get that done in August?
Yeah, well, so we're right in the middle of the budget, FY18 budget discussions. I think we're going to mark up the budget. So all this is tied together. But I'm on the budget committee, and we've got real challenges. I've said all along that the biggest threat to the future of our country is our debt and deficit spending and getting on better financial footing and not handing this country to a generation that puts them so deep in the hole they can't get out of it. At the same time, the number one job of the federal government is to keep us safe and address the national security risks. And as you know, when you think about Korea, you think about North Korea, you think about Syria and what's going on there with Russia, Iran. We're just seeing heightened risk and increasing threats. So our military has been degraded, I believe, in terms of assets over the years, and we've got to make investments there. So how do you do that? How do you rebuild the military and mitigate some of the cuts that will hurt rural America on the domestic discretionary side, and still work towards a balanced budget? The answer is mandatory spending programs. The answer is entitlement programs. So I'm hopeful that we're going to make some meaningful investment where we need to, like the military. And then I hope that we're able to also come out with meaningful cuts in spending on the mandatory side that will help us get to that balance, reduce deficit spending and balanced budget. I'm very pleased with the conversation so far. I'm actually about to go to a conference meeting, which is going to be at 9 o'clock my time, with the leadership of the Republican Party and the entire Republican members of the House. And I will speak to that this morning because I think there is a path forward, but it's going to require courage for everybody. And I'm going to tell them, everybody's going to have to make some sacrifices. Everybody's got things they want to protect. We got to put everything on the table. We won't rebuild the military in 1 year, and we're not going to solve the national debt crisis in 1 year. But we need to make strides and meaningful steps forward towards those goals, or the American people are going to lose confidence. We are the party of fiscal conservatism. We need to finally demonstrate that.
Yeah, and twice President Donald Trump has put out budgets that seem to cut a lot. Is that something that the Republicans are looking at, or does it look like that's just way too much?
So I applaud President Trump for presenting a balanced budget. That's the first time since the Obama administration, or prior to the Obama administration, that Congress has received a balanced budget. We haven't seen that in the last 8 years. So Matt, I give him credit for that. Now, the question is, how do you balance it? And how do we do it strategically and prudently? Because just taking a whack at something doesn't necessarily solve the problem. It can actually create more problems. What if you cut too deeply in infrastructure? It's going to affect your economy. What if you cut too deeply in national security with these increasing threats? My criticism of the Trump budget is that it's the same thing we've tried to do over the last several years. We've tried to balance the budget on domestic discretionary money. That you could take all the discretionary domestic spending, non-defense discretionary. That's ag, that's infrastructure, it's R&D, it's other programs in education and others. There's plenty of waste and inefficiency to cut, but at some point you're going to have diminishing returns there, and you're never going to balance the budget until you go and look at the debt drivers on the mandatory spending side. So I wish Trump would have focused more on that, but the good news is that's our job in Congress, and so we're going to I hope work to set a path for a sustainable path fiscally, and do that by looking at mandatory spending.
So the House has actually done a lot. And I know that there hasn't been as much credit there as there should be, but the House has actually gotten the health care bill passed, and also you've gotten the Dodd-Frank passed, and y'all are apparently working on the tax plan. Or do you have any information about what y'all might be looking at as far as the tax plan?
We're going to need to reduce the rates for everyone and simplify the tax code for everyone. Reagan did this. Remember, coming out of Carter, we had GDP below 1%. Today, we can barely get to 2%, and we're getting used to that number, and we shouldn't. We're the greatest economy in the world. We got to reduce government cost and regulations and taxes. We have the highest corporate income tax rate in the free world. That's unacceptable. So let's free the economy from the burden of taxes and regulation, and let's bring that capital. There's trillions of dollars overseas that we need to incentivize to be put back in play in our economy, create jobs, get Americans back to work. It will solve a whole lot to get tax reform. But you're right. We can't get there until we pass health care reform. Right. We did that out of the House. Yes.
There's the music. We've got to take a break, and we appreciate you coming on this morning, being with us. This imparted some useful and interesting information.
Thank you, guys. Always good to be with you.
Thank you,
All right.
Congressman.
Appreciate your time.
We'll talk to you
All right.
next week or
God
two.
bless.